Sophie, thank you so much for joining us here on SenSpace. I've been hoping to have this conversation with you for a long time, actually. Maybe even going back to first meeting you back, I think it was in 2019, just before the main Extinction Rebellion protests took to the street in April, and you were very much involved in the movement at that stage. But then I've watched your activist career take off, shall we say, as you become more and more bold in your actions. And I wonder if, for people who are new to the story, whether you could tell us a bit about what happened with the Barclays action, why you got involved, and what happened.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on, Jacob and Matthew. Yeah, what a lot to explore. It's very strange thinking back to 2019, 2018. Just prior to that, I was in the advertising industry doing a very different thing. So yeah, fast forward to 2021, the Barclays action, April the 7th at 7 a.m. 2021, along with 6 other women. I walked to the tube station, went down to Canary Wharf with a hammer in my handbag. I'd painted the night before, pink, with the words "Act with Love" on it. And we went, to Canary Wharf, to Barclays Bank, to Barclays HQ, the biggest funders of fossil fuels in Europe. They were at that time. And we were very smartly dressed as well. That's why they didn't catch us. And we walked up to the windows and popped our handbags down on the ground, pulled our hammers out, and each broke 1 pane of glass, totaling 7 panes of glass in the Barclays HQ building. We then peacefully sat down. Took the police ages to come, actually, but anyway, that's for another time. Sat down and waited to be arrested. And following that day, we then waited for nearly 2 years to go on trial. And we, in November last year, 2022, were in the Crown Court in Southwark and on trial for criminal damage of £100,000. And we went through that 2-week trial. And here we are. I'm not in prison, but I'm sure we'll go into more detail of what happened. But yeah, for context, it's been a wild few years. And a really incredible and exhausting and beautiful and terrifying experience all at once. And here we are.
I'm noticing that I'm really curious to hear more about what that moment was like. You said you were smartly dressed. You had a hammer painted pink in your handbag.
Yeah.
And there must have been a kind of point of no return where you realized, I'm actually doing this now. What was that moment like?
Well, I wonder whether that moment was when I arrived the night before with all the girls and all our paints and hammers and, met the night before. I wonder whether it was the moment in the large meetings when we'd had about 80 people interested in the action. And I wonder whether that was the moment of no return, or I wonder whether it was as I was standing on the escalator going up going up the escalator out into Canary Wharf, where actually I had worked a few years previously in a law firm there, which was a rather strange cyclical moment. So that, yeah, it felt like there were many points of no return, but particularly that moment, actually just before going up the escalators, when I was on the tube and I was sitting opposite my co-defendant, co-smashing lady, Zoe Cowen, and we were sitting there with our masks on. We had masks in the suffragette colours, and sitting there very smartly. And as I said, I'd been many times on that tube to go to work, actually. And anyway, so I had this handbag over my shoulder, and we caught eyes. We caught eyes on the tube, surrounded by these city folk going to work. And what was it like? I mean, you feel alive. I really, really felt alive. Like, we were looking at each other going, there's like, you're right. You know, I was wrapped up in that our eyes were saying, or at least Zoe's eyes, and I could feel mine sort of saying the same thing. It's like, holy shit, why are we doing this? Why do we have to do this? What, like, the desperation and the sadness in going, how has it come to this? And also at the same time, this kind of like, you know, cheeky grin and smile, being like, of course we're doing this. Like, this is what standing in your body and your truth like actually means. And we're not fucking scared of all of these, you know, the things that are going to come down on top of us following it. We're not scared, because the reality is so much bigger, like so much more vast and so much more real than all of these kind of restrictions that you know, people in their perceived positions of power can place on us. So you've got, all these, this is just multiple sort of emotions coming up in that moment as we're sitting on the Jubilee line.
Yeah, I could feel some of that sadness as you were talking as well. Like, and there's something really striking to me about how you're holding both of those feelings almost simultaneously, the tragedy that we're witnessing, but alongside that, as you described, like, this is what it feels like to stand in your truth, to be congruent, to actually have your inner and outer aligned, and the thrill of that, and the amount of energy that was available in that position. And I love what you said about how the vastness of it, how suddenly all the machinery of the criminal justice system and the consequences kind of almost seem almost inconsequential relative to the stakes.
Well, it's interesting you say the word, like, you know, that energy of that of feeling in line with it's the feeling in line with your values and acting in line with your values, which I've done a few other actions that felt really important for me in this situation, and at every single moment, whether it was, you know, I walked into an airport and did a protest there, or chained myself to the railings of Parliament, and in those moments, and then going up the escalators to break the windows, there's all of those moments, everything becomes so vibrant, like the colours of, you know, the departure gate, or the railings, or the, you know, the gates as you go out of the tube, and the big, it all becomes so, you become so present, so present, and so sure that what, for me, I felt so sure that what I was doing was the not just the right thing to do, because I think right and wrong is a difficult kind of concept to, you know, difficult duality to work with. For me, it's more about that feeling of being acting in compassion, like acting in a way that is congruent with the state of affairs, and, you know, it's fully non-violent, and it is, you know, it's fully mischievous, it's fully like breaking through this paradigm, and in doing that, everything is so vibrant. It's amazing how much my body was like flourishing in these moments, because I don't know, it's just it's almost as though I felt like I feel in connection with the trees and all the bees and the clouds, and like you vibrate with this, like, I don't know, it's like it's like I'm looking out at a pavement at the moment. It's like, the cracks in the pavement, there are things pushing up through these perceived structures, right? And they're going, no, fuck you, I'm coming through and doing what I need to do, which is to support life to thrive. That is what I'm doing. And yeah, solidarity with those roots.
Yeah, but it feels like these actions kind of brought you into an alignment with like some primordial life force. Yeah. that maybe we should always be in alignment with, but we're kind of living in this system that has very deliberately and systematically cut us off from that.
Totally. And I actually think back to I know we discussed this a bit actually really early on, Matthew, when we met when you were working for the FT back in 2018, maybe it was.
Yeah, I was freelancing when I wrote a magazine story about XR. Yeah,
that was it. Yeah. And we met in this context, and I remember you asking me how I got into all of this, and I remember you being interested about I was like, oh, I did a meditation retreat and kind of wanted to push that to the side a bit, because I was like, that's not the right story. But when we're talking about this kind of being an alignment thing and what it feels like, I'd come back from this year of deep meditation, deep connection with everything. I mean, my mind was blown. It was like a sort of year-long orgasm of life. It was just incredible. And I came back to London, and all of that energy just went like poof, and I felt like totally restricted and shut down, and just like what can I do here that supports life and things and being and everything else to thrive. And then I arrived at an Extinction Rebellion meeting, and I'd actually, as I think I said to you before, Matthew, I'd been enrolled. I was working through a master's in journalism at the time at City University, so it was very, it was good learning, but different energy. And anyway, turned up in this room of all these people that were embodying that we're going to act with compassion, and we're just going to do it. We're going to do what feels right, what is right. No, not right. Got to move away from that. What feels, compassionate and thriving and like real. And so the energy in that, and God, the word energy, isn't it? I mean, what vibe? What can I use? The feeling.
So the word energy is perfectly acceptable in the sense space arena.
Great. The vibrations in that room were. It was the first time I'd been in a space that felt like that state of what I can only describe as full alignment with the universe, with the world, with all that lives, that I'd been experiencing when I was in states of deep meditation. Like I moved into this room of the early stages of Extinction Rebellion, and there was this energy of love. Like it was just vibrating in the room. That's it is the life force energy. I just, there was no logic. It went beyond logic at that point for me. I was like, this feels good.
I love how you've articulated that, because I was a kind of fellow traveler. I was always a journalist in my role in engaging with the movement, but I felt that that's why I found it so compelling. And I think this is why I'm so happy we're having this conversation, because you've put it into words so beautifully. In the media, there's a question I'm sitting with here about how these movements are represented, and how quickly people go into judgment around the tactics, the disruption, but how that primal energy, that alignment is so real. and so intoxicating. And maybe intoxicating is not quite the right word. It's enlivening. It's energizing. It's inspiring. I used to see the Extinct XR symbol on flags, and I would feel like crying. I would feel like tearful. I would just feel something in that field.
Yeah.
At the movement's kind of peak was so powerful. And it was like something breaking through from another dimension, which was the same dimension that you were touching in your states of meditation.
Yeah.
And which I just, as I say, not as a member, like it didn't really have members, but even as a journalist, I felt I could feel it. I could feel that energy. And I felt there was something incredibly compelling about that. And it was inextricably entwined with the fact that it was disruptive, that it involved essentially, like what Gail Bradbrook, one of the co-founders, would say, is this spell-breaking act of breaking the law, essentially, of stepping outside of the system. That was what the energy, that seemed to be a kind of fundamental ingredient of that energy, or a channel of that energy. Like it wouldn't have, that energy wouldn't have been present without
the law breaking
and your hammers and others locking on and blocking roads. It just wouldn't have been the same.
I think what's interesting there in that, I mean, God, yeah, I hear you, Matthew, like it is, and you were and are a participant. I mean, that was what was so beautiful about it, especially with people from the media who actually got involved internally, not internally in the organizing, but were in the office and thinking about, use the word field there. You remember that office we had in Euston, and
at the Drummond Street,
addicted to it. Yeah, Drummond Street. And we'd go,
it was kind of big. It was like let's describe it. It was a sort of pretty ramshackle, big open plan, like
massive. I remember the first day going in there, and it was completely empty, and it was like bare. And then within days, and Roger Hallam, one of the co-founders, just like found his room and sat there on the floor on his laptop, and that was his room for the whole thing. And then slowly the arts team came in and started putting up the flags where they would do flag printing, and then the samba band would come in and put in all their drums, and the wellbeing team put all their candles around. And then us in the media team, we had our quite sort of formal looking desks, sort of relatively central, so people could come and tell us things as and when they happened. And it just became this, it was wild, like people, the synchronicity in that room, going back to this field idea, was you'd kind of go in there and you go, I really think we should write a piece, on I don't know, the faith element of the movement, and then all of a sudden a vicar would come in, and then right next to the vicar would be a writer, and actually quite a good one at that. And then we'd be like, oh, okay, well, you can do that thing. Okay, off you go. And then someone, it would be like, maybe we need to, well, on the large scale, maybe we need a boat.
Yeah,
a boat. Yeah, cool. Where should we put the boat? Oh, yeah, maybe we should put it on the water. Nah, we should put it on the streets. Yeah, let's put it on the street. Okay, cool, let's do it. Who's going to do that? Okay, what color should it be? And then, oh, who's going to buy it on eBay? And all of a sudden, we've got a fucking pink boat in the middle of Oxford Circus because someone has thought that it was possible. Someone has thought, and then the field has supported it to happen. And I think there's something so important there about it's not so much like this disruptive energy. It's not so much like we're going to break the law and be angry and cross over something. It's actually, we're going to dream and we're going to believe that another world is possible, and then we're just going to create it.
And it kind of rushes in to the you create this consciousness field, and reality rushes in to catch up. And even I experienced this because I was on a brief kind of break between jobs at Reuters, and I remember pitching to one of the editors, like, there's this movement called Extinction Rebellion. It's going to be a big thing, and they've already done some, and just glazed, impossible. And then I had this break, and I used to work at Financial Times, and I thought, I'll pitch it to the, FT, they might go for it. And I thought it's a bit of a long shot. And even I think I was on the train to the meeting with this editor at the magazine, And I was thinking, I need some kind of financial angle. And someone from XR put me in touch with a former HSBC banker who we probably
Andrew.
both know. Yes. I was like, I've got the banker turned rebel, which was exactly what
you
the
needed.
FT needed to kind of take it over the line.
Yeah.
And even the editor I spoke to, a woman there, was like, yeah, I'm on their mailing list. What is this thing? Like, it's really interesting. And it was on the front page. Like, I put it on the front page of the magazine on the Saturday before the Monday rebellion began. And even that was like a bit of a miracle. Like, how did that, like, how did the FT end up running a pretty supportive story over 3,000 words about XR on the eve of, it just happens to be me available to do it. I mean, that, like, it's really hard to get something on the front page of the FT, like, magazine, like, really hard. And it was so easy. It just happened.
It's synchronicity, and it's you know, so many times I remember, like, afterwards, you know, when it all got a bit sticky with October and following the actions that we were creating following, and I won't go too deeply into there because it really changes the energy. But one of the things I remember from the following, you know, a couple of years was, how do we recreate, you know, people be like, but what was it about the April rebellion with the boat? Oh, maybe it was the boat. Maybe it was the trees. Maybe it was the fact that we blocked an intersection on a consumer, you know, road like Oxford Circus. Oh, maybe it was, I don't know, the arrestee support, like all of these different elements. And it's like, it wasn't any one thing. There's no recipe to recreate it other than, I believe, deep trust, deep love, and a belief that anything really is possible. And those elements combined at that perfect moment just created something unimaginable.
I'm very struck just hearing you guys go through this and hearing about the dynamism, and it sounds like, to some extent, the spiritual qualities that have been flowing through Extinction Rebellion. And I think, like many people, I have largely encountered the movement through the mediation of media, and particularly through the mediation of those actions, those disruptive actions on, you know, particularly the City of London. And of course, you know, a lot of people get pissed off about those things as well, which is sort of what they're designed to do, of course. So I'm interested first of all, I'm interested in the kind of meme magic at play here, because I remember David Fuller talking about the Extinction Rebellion symbol, you know, utilizing these ancient ruins to kind of create it, and how there was kind of this kind of genius that seems to be flowing a little bit in the way the creativity of the movement, as you describe. And then also in this particular action, it sounds like you really intentionally evoked the suffragette image. Like, when I saw the front picture of all of you on the day of the protest, it immediately evoked that. Like, I didn't have to think consciously. The suffragette vibe was coming through. So I'm interested in the meme magic, and I'm also interested in just getting to, you know, the obvious question, really, for people who are skeptical and on the fence about this. Like, why are you taking this action? What is the sense of emergency that so animates you, and also how do you kind of sublate that anger and more, you know, there's like a sublation of violence into creative action, is what I'm hearing in this. And that's a very unique thing to do. And I think often we're kind of confusing it with simply reactionary anger. And that's not what I hear from you today at all.
Yeah, I mean, wow, what an interesting winding through of different themes, Jacob. There's a lot there. The runes of the symbol. Just a quick note on that, something that was just another just wild synchronicity was when we chose the locations for the blockades of the April Rebellion. Next day, discussing them, and we have this massive map up, and we're going, and there, and there, and there. So, Marble Arch, Oxford Circus, Piccadilly Circus, Waterloo Bridge. Gosh, I can't remember the other one.
Parliament.
Parliament. And you look at it on a map of London, and it's the 4 points of an X with Piccadilly Circus in the middle.
Wow. Like Hawksmoor churches, like an occult kind of symbol.
So mad. And like the locations have been chosen for that. Waterloo Bridge was chosen for it being a bridge from old to new. It was a bridge built by women. There's a lot of beautiful symbology there. Piccadilly Circus, Eros, love, like at the center of all of this. Parliament, don't need to explain that. Marble Arch was big and a convenient park, and Oxford Circus was this intersection, as I said, of the very sort of strange advertising world that's very, got this sort of veneer of truth, but it's kind of not. And then this massive shopping street, which the suffragettes themselves had smashed, quite a few windows, as a century before. So even in that, there was so much symbology, and it was just mad that it actually turned out to be the symbol, and we didn't even know. But yeah, talking about, was it, what are we calling it? The meme
magic. Yeah.
Magic. I found, the suffragettes, there's a lot to, there's an interesting thing with the suffragettes, both in terms of actually the media discussion, but also why are we choosing to use the tactics of these women who were part of the campaign to win us the vote. Oh gosh. For me, it was really important. Why did I even choose to be action? I think the suffragette inspiration, the inspiration from the suffragettes for me was it's to do with something that it's like, women are equal to men, god damn it. It's a truth. It's a deep truth, because even if you divide, even the division, that's a whole other conversation, but the division between women and men, the division between anyone is a kind of strange, it's a strange thing that we perceive, and as I think in this room, at least we're mostly of the agreement, but that everything kind of is one at its baseline, and these different expressions come through, and for me the suffragist balance has always been a huge inspiration for me, because the work I do with Switch It Green, which is a mass movement of account switching and putting pressure on banks via lobbying and moving bank accounts out of ones that fund fossil fuels, that's quite suffragist in its energy and its nature. It's not law breaking, but I know that it is a very effective tactic, and then the suffragette side, breaking the windows, is definitely law breaking. It turns out, and in that it's a different energy. There's something there that perhaps not as many people will get on board with, but I hope many more people will switch their accounts than break windows. It would be great if as many people switched their accounts and broke windows, and that was hundreds of thousands of people. Wouldn't that be amazing? But there we are. One can dream. But the suffragette side, the act of breaking that window, I guess it's a meme, perhaps, in a way. Visually, I think it is really powerful. I remember looking at the images of the suffragettes actually recently. A colleague and friend told me that her grandmother had thrown a brick through the Home Office. And I think there's something really interesting about this. Gail's also talks about it a lot. It's this breaking through of paradigms. You break through into a different paradigm, and that's kind of what we need to do, I believe, as society at the moment. And we don't. It's not that we need to forcibly break through it, but actually the way to break through it, I believe, is to be supported to and have the resources to imagine something different, to expand, emotionally, spiritually, like, and I believe we've got a deep responsibility to support our fellow humans to have the resource, the space, the time, the financial capacity, quite frankly, to be still and facilitate this imagining of something different. That's kind of what the citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies model, which is the third demand of XR, is about. It's about supporting, in part, it's about supporting people to come together to build and create and imagine something different. What is possible if we discuss, and that is breaking through into a new paradigm. So whether it is a citizens' assembly, or it is breaking a window, or it is, saying something disruptive in the media, all of these things are invitations, I believe, to actually really fulfill what our capacity is as human beings.
I ask about what happened next, because I feel you've really captured that early energy, that magic, that miracle in a way of XR in its early days, how it just kind of erupted through from another dimension and somehow self-organized and orchestrated and was incredibly successful. And just to round that out, it did make a global impact in the media. I mean, it was covered all around the world for days and days. I mean, it sent a ripple around the whole planet. It wasn't just a UK story, it was a global story. And there were offshoots all over the world that also take place simultaneously.
92 countries.
And suddenly we went into the pandemic the next year and suddenly everything changed. But at that moment, it was very extraordinary contribution in terms of symbolically and raising awareness of the climate crisis, but also showing that people were willing to take extraordinary action.
And governments responded. There were declarations of a climate and environment emergency.
It had this huge impact. But I'm curious about your journey as well, because you broke the windows, the police came, and then what happened?
Then what happened? Well, the police arrived and they handcuffed us and they put us in vans. And I was sitting in the back with Kazi, one of my co-defendants, and she is Welsh, and she was telling me a Welsh folk story all the way back to the police station, which was kind of amazing. And actually, oh God, I mean, just bringing myself back into that roller coaster of emotion, which has kind of identified mine and many others last 5 years, I think, but we were back at the police station, got a call from the lawyers, and then we found out that it actually was quite a lot more money than we'd thought. We weren't quite considering it to be nearly £100,000 worth of damage. That was a bit of a shock, especially when you're then brought back from that phone call with your lawyer where someone's watching you and you're in your, grey tracksuit and you're actually absolutely knackered because you've hardly had any sleep. And then you're kind of landing being like, oh my God, I've just done this thing. Wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. What does this mean? And then the logic starts to come back into your head, and then the fear comes because you're locked in this room and it's really cold. And, and I mean, hugely, hugely grateful that I'm not subject to that unless I essentially choose to be. But at the same time, you're there and it's really, really scary. And so I'm sort of back in that room going, oh God, 100 grand's worth of damage. It wasn't meant to be that much. and then that kind of fear comes. And then we spent the night in the cell, and then the next day we were picked up at sort of 3 a.m, let out in the middle of the night, and then we were told that none of us could speak to each other. We weren't allowed to speak to each other until we came round to the following hearing. So I was picked up by my partner, taken home, and had a good rest of sleep, and then sort of woke up in the morning and was like, whoa, what just happened? And then we wait for nearly 2 years to be put on trial. Of course, we argued that we were not guilty of criminal damage. I stand by the fact I believe quite obviously that it was damage, but I don't believe it was criminal. I don't believe it should be criminal to, at this point. And Jacob, you were talking a bit about the emergency. It's I think emergency is a tricky word. It was a useful word perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. For me now, it's like, yes, it's a crisis, but there's an element there of it being almost very a little bit too, like, if we don't do something and stop something else will happen. Actually, we are in a, as I think more and more of us are becoming aware, we're in a permanent state of increasing breakdown and falling apart of life systems. Tipping points in the Amazon, tipping points in the oceans. It's all happening. And so what is the response to this? It is to continue to act in line with what is necessary and feels appropriate. And I think breaking one pane of glass in a building that's making decisions that are burning down, towns, like destroying the natural habitats of so many beautiful creatures, and like just turning our world into a hothouse that will be unlivable. I think breaking a pane of glass in one of those windows is kind of okay, and it is at the point of like what else we can work on many corners, we can act on many cylinders, if you like. No, maybe not cylinders, but it's a tapestry of action, and I believe still that this was very appropriate. And now I can't even remember the question because I've got taken it.
Of just like, how direct is the connection between Barclays policy and the destruction of habitats, or these other impacts?
Oh, right. Okay, so the investments by Barclays Bank are in fossil fuel oil and gas projects that, by their nature of being oil fields both on land and in the sea, rip apart the habitats where they are, because instead of lovely coral reefs or beautiful, bushels of thousands of living things and actually, communities and their water systems, and we rip all that down, and instead we dig a massive coal mine or we drill for oil, and that community, whether it be a human or non-human community, is just torn apart in order for those fields and coal mines and tar sands to be exploited. So it's pretty direct.
And presumably the emissions from all of these projects are what are driving the climate crisis, right?
Terrifying. So that was biodiversity and, general, that looking at just then. The fact that I find perhaps the most almost unconceivable, if that's even a word, is that there are enough oil and gas projects that are waiting to be financed, already identified. They're just, they're there, they're on spreadsheets somewhere. Someone's got a button that will be like go when they've got the money. And there are enough of those ready that that if they're financed by global banks such as Barclays, HSBC, JP Morgan, Chase, they'll blow the carbon budget of the world 7 times over. And they just need those CEOs to go, yeah, we'll invest in that. And then, yeah, emissions rocket to a level that's kind of inconceivable. So yeah, pane of glass.
I'm interested in the
Wait, Jacob, go.
the nature of the nature of the change that's being sought through this. Like, what is the quality of that, and is it really about shifting policy in corporations? Is that the most important leverage point? And can that occur without the larger cultural consciousness?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you've kind of nailed this whole, theory of change thing. That absolutely, it's definitely not just about the policy shift. Like, that would be, a massive plaster, really, if we just have to keep putting pressure on people to change policy, then, and they're not actually shifting their perspectives as beings, as part of this greater whole, then there's just going to continue to be those kind of decision makers at the top, and we're all going to be absolutely exhausted, burning ourselves out on the outside and partly on the inside, pressuring for decades to come. That's it. So yeah, I think you've touched on something there, Jacob, that's so important. And Matthew and I have talked about this before, I think, is that how both things need to happen. All things need to happen at the same time. For many people, the policy change is actually the only thing. And you know what? They're incredibly good at pressuring people for policy change. And I want them to happy for them to keep going on their tip, because different people feel they've got a different place in this struggle, in this movement of change. Sometimes I think, oh God, shall I just stop it all and retrain as a psychotherapist or like a healer or something, and just like be like, I'm just gonna do that thing where you just try and support, or like even like a teacher, help young people, especially young boys. Actually, thank God, in the last couple of decades, it perhaps has got a little bit better in terms of, supporting the upbringing of people that are going to go into these positions. I was at Oxford University, packed full of people that are now in government. I saw that energy of people going through the Oxford Union Debating Society and just going, that energy is fucked. It's so mad.
It's so true, yes.
Looking at them going, guys, are you happy? Like, really? Like, on a deep level, is this, or is it just all up in here? And people, you can even see it, and it's just me criticizing other people, and I can't even seeing it in people's bodies. There's this kind of like walking around like lollipops, it's like, where is the embodiment? Where is the connection? And I can say that because I think I was like that myself, and can sometimes fall back into that. I think we all need a lot of help and a lot of practice to remember what is deeply true and healthy. So yeah, I don't want all the healers to get totally exhausted by going into horrible corporate big CEO things and just have all their energy, like their vibe just like killed, because I can see that happening. But it is like, I believe there is a massive cultural shift, perspective shift, and you can start. It's starting to happen. You can start to feel it happening. Yeah, do you think so?
Well, my impression is that many, if not most, of the people in these institutions recognize the crisis, and they feel trapped. Many of them are on the verge of burnout or suffering from depression or anxiety. These large corporate structures are very unhappy, dysfunctional places for them. I think that's a fair generalization to make. Certainly the case at Reuters, where I was working until just over a year ago. And I mean, I haven't broken any windows, but I've recently been writing, essentially calling the company out for its fossil fuel ties, which I would never really have imagined doing before, and receiving very grateful emails from people in the company who absolutely recognize the conflict that they're in. And I really agree. Like, we're in an unsustainable situation on almost every scale, like personally, societally, globally. Something wants to change, and people feel it, and there's a hunger for it. And that's partly why we make this podcast, to feed that and to open more conversations.
Totally.
But it's something to do with the energy that you were talking about at the beginning, that you connected with in meditation on retreat, but also found in a very different form, in a collective expression, in the very kind of the most beautiful moments within XR at the beginning. But I really want to bring us to your trial experience, because that feels like such a crucial part of your story as well. And I feel that it maybe speaks to many of the themes that we've been starting to touch on in quite a concrete way. So I don't know whether you'd like to say a bit about what the trial was like.
Sure. Yeah, wow. So it was 2 weeks long, technically, in person in the court. The weeks prior and the weeks following are definitely part of the experience, even from the moment that we did the action. The 2 weeks to trial, I remember going down on the first morning, and we were really prepared, the seven of us women. We've got Annie, who's in her 60s, she's a grandmother. There's Nikki, who lives off grid and is just like the most solid human. I love her. I love them all. Zoe, who's like knows all of the facts, business woman. Just the variety of everyone's stories, it was really there. I mean, thinking back to it, so it was essentially 2 weeks in a room with no windows in Southwark Crown Court. I had to remember that actually Simon, a friend of mine who was part of the Shell trial a couple of years before, said, remember that the river is next to you. Just go back to feeling the river. Sometimes it was kind of hard to go back to feeling the river, because I was like, oh my God, this is like, oh God, it was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind, but it also, as I said before, a bit like during the action, I've almost never felt more alive. The support from our friends and family was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary example of the deep love. It brought, friends from the movement, and my parents were there, my partner was there, but also friends from outside of the movement, from university, from from the civil service, the lawyers or whatever. They were there in support. It brought so many people together because of it being about us as individuals, not really the movement as much. And I think that's where this kind of change can happen, is when people are going, yeah, it's not like Extinction Rebellion, it's Annie. It's Annie who's sitting in this room with this judge and this jury, and she's on trial because she believes that that breaking a window is nothing compared to what that organization is doing. So the judge let us very kindly sit in the, like, we weren't in the dock, and 5 of the 7 of us were representing ourselves. So we had our big stacks of paper, and we were supported by our barrister for 2 of them, Owen, and I kind of oh gosh, so many things. The jury being chosen was, I wasn't quite expecting it to be quite as actually beautiful as an experience as that. We were all sitting in a row, and you've got your judge up there with his wig, you've got your family and friends behind, and then the lovely clerk opens the door, and you've got this pool of like 25 people that come in, and they're the jurors that are going to be judging you, and you're going to be working with them for 2 weeks. I was kind of thinking, oh my God, you guys have no idea what you're in for. Because, you know, a lot of what we were talking about through the 2 weeks was the state of the planet. Like, I definitely believe that not enough people really understand the severity of the crisis. I think that's actually one of the fundamental problems that we have with this. You know, people go, oh, anyway. So you've got 25 jurors, and they're being selected, and one by one they're going to sit in their place there. And you're thinking, I'm being judged by my peers here. This is kind of incredible, and also scary and terrifying and strange. So then there we are. We've got the jury. Actually, one of the best moments with the jury was when our tools were brought out. So my pink hammer was in this like evidence tube, and it's bright pink, and it says care and act with love on it, and Annie's says for my grandson, and that's in another. She's in the suffragette colours, her pickaxe that she uses to go fossiling in Devon on the coast. I'd found it in found mine in my partner's shed. You know, I'm sure it's just for like posts or whatever. And the clerk takes them round to the jury, and you're kind of watching this, like the jury members and the prosecution woman, who is she really wanted to win. Again, whole nother piece, but she was going, and feel how heavy they are. Yes, Your Honour. Yes, I think, can you this one particularly, yep, that's about the same weight as all of the others. I was thinking, mine was actually heavier than all the others, but you can say that if you want to. Oh gosh. So handing them around, and then the clerk is showing this hammer to the judge. And, and the judge could have been like my dad or my grandfather or something. He's there, and he goes, oh, okay. And he kind of looks quizzically at it, and he's almost stifling a laugh. He said, and it was moments like that where the absurdity of the whole situation just comes through. It's like a Monty Python, you're kind of going, is this real? Like, am I really here? Is he really wearing a wig? Like the theatre of the whole thing is, and so it was this kind of weird sort of oscillation between moments like that where you're like, this is the absurd, and I kind of feel very happy in the absurd. I feel like it actually for me is one of the frameworks of explanations of reality that I find the most comforting and the most real, actually, but also totally bizarre. And then on the other side, you're going, we are actually laying out our hearts and souls to a point where, I couldn't eat for like 2 weeks. That's quite unlike me. I was just in this kind of this really intense, like you really feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You're kind of there in the jaws of justice, and you're desperately trying to speak to these people as humans, because we are all humans in this. We're just with our weaknesses, just just trying to connect. And then you've got all this rigmarole of the court system, which of course we knew it was going to be like that. Like, we're not idiots. We knew that was what it was going to be, but it did, you could just feel that juxtaposition of that absurd sort of almost comedic moments, and then this desperate, open love, just laying it all out, because there's nothing else. It's like, this is it, like everything is falling apart. What are we meant to do, guys? Seriously. And you've got jury members crying, the judge staring quite clearly down at just his papers. It was, I mean, words can't even describe what an intense, it's like a microcosm of, like, perhaps the strange society that we found ourselves in. Some people desperately trying to be real and go, the laws that you have are not supporting life. Like I said that in when it came to the sentencing, I said to the judge, if we'd met in a different situation and you weren't in your role as judge and I wasn't in my role as defendant, and instead I asked you to perhaps step into your role as father, as brother, would you condemn us for this action? Like, would you, given the last 2 weeks and what you've heard? And he said, Ms. Cowen, you've already stated your claim about, this, you've already stated your protest. This is about the law and the law simply. And I said, Your Honour, if we follow the law in its current form, everything on earth is going to die. And I was sitting quite near him, and I could just feel this kind of, there's this slight sort of shake, and there was a sort of slightly strange feeling in the room, because it was moments like that where you're going, hang on guys, let's just pull ourselves out of our roles here and actually choose what we want to do. And I think that for me is a lesson for myself moving forwards, and for anyone that I hope to inspire and encourage and support, is to really think and feel as to whether the roles that we've been given by someone else, or that we've chosen to step into because it's, our career choice or something we feel obliged to do, are those roles and what they may lead us to do actually supporting life to thrive. Yeah. Or is it just another day at the office? So when it comes to, whether or not these actions are, the right way to go about things, and that being in that courtroom and standing there, I didn't feel, I didn't, when I was standing up giving my witness statement, I didn't feel scared. It felt fucking intense. It was really intense, but I didn't feel scared, because I feel that if we really are and this is how I really felt, I can only speak for myself, but when I am acting in a way that is non-violent, non-harming, yet also shaking things up to in service of shifting the narrative towards something more sustainable, more thriving, shining the light on the things that aren't that aren't right. For me, if I'm in that state of honesty and truth, then I can't be scared. And there was so much support. I mean, yeah, I was nervous about prison, but also not really. Not really, because yeah, it's incredible what you feel you can do when you just take that little leap into I'm gonna act in line with supporting life to thrive. It's quite a simple choice. It's a simple choice. It might not have simple consequences, but it's certainly a very nourishing choice.
Yeah, I find the theater of the scene that you've laid out quite moving just to hear about. And all throughout this conversation, I feel the exciting, dangerous edge of that place, and the moments in which I've touched on that and I feel called to do something which is, transgressive and in some ways divinely aligned. And the courage that requires. And, again and again and again, it's not simply one choice. I think I'm curious as we round out also to hear about the judgment that you received and how you felt about that, whether you felt favorable, because my impression was that the judgment, the verdict did kind of give real credence to the movement and its goals. It wasn't like an outright denial at all. It seemed quite sympathetic.
Well, yeah. I mean, so we were found guilty by the jury. They were deliberating for 2 full days. I do believe that, I know that the judge directed the jury to find us guilty. I saw it happen. I heard it happen. It was a strange moment where he kind of popped and brought us all back to, he can actually decide basically whether we're guilty or not guilty, because 9 women in this jury of 12, and most of these people are non-white, and this old white man is in his position of authority telling people what to do. It seemed to me I don't know quite how I'm reading into that, but there's something there about that decision. However, when it came to the sentencing, and we all went with our little wheelie bags, I was packed up. I'd given all of my, my bank account details and my rent situation and everything to my partner, and messages, emails, all of that. I'd just gone here, because I'm expecting to go in for, it was 6 months to 4 years is the recommended time for a custodial sentence following this kind of action. And at least if that didn't happen, I was expecting, as we'd had this long conversation with the probation officer, I was expecting a curfew from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. For 6 months at least, or community service of hundreds of hours. I knew that if I wasn't sent to prison, then I would be getting one of those punishments, because the probation officer had said I have to recommend these things because of the value of the damage. And Barclays themselves had ordered thousands of pounds worth of compensation. I mean, Jesus. Anyway, thousands of pounds worth of compensation. And we're sitting in the courtroom, and we've been marched by 100 women, 100 people dressed as suffragettes down to the courtroom on that day of the sentencing, end of January. This was 3 weeks after the trial. And there's an overflow room of people watching. The support was incredible, because we really thought that we were going in, and then the judge said, all rise. I sort of stand up, and actually I couldn't quite. I think I hadn't quite realised that was going to be the judgment. The at that moment, so I was like, oh, okay. I'm just standing up, and then he's going through us one by one, and he said something that was, looking back on it, I think quite a radical move for that judge, for him. You know, arguably he could have done something different. He could have done more, but I think it was. He said, given that the overwhelming evidence supports your beliefs, the overwhelming scientific evidence supports your beliefs, and that you all have caring responsibilities. And I think words to the effect of, you're all actually clearly really nice women who really fucking care. That was the subtext. I'm willing to suspend the custodial sentence. So I was given 6 months sentence, suspended for 2 years. So if I break the law again within 2 years, then I go inside for 6 months. The others were a variety of 6, 7, 8 months. No community service, no curfew. And he said, if Barclays really want to pursue the compensation, then that will not happen in my court. They will have to do that elsewhere. So he was just basically like, yeah, bugger off Barclays, that's not going to happen. Not here. It's not appropriate. I think he said it wasn't appropriate. And then everyone whooped and cheered, and we were like, oh my God, we're not going to prison. Wow. But yeah, it was big for him. I think to do that, it was I think he really heard us, actually. I think he really heard us, and it is a precedent for cases to come. The HSBC girls are coming up in October. They did the action on HSBC, similar 2 weeks or 3 weeks later than us. And it is a precedent that criminal damage to this level of an institution like that, you're not going to get off lightly. But actually, we got off pretty lightly. You're not going to not have a suspended sentence. You're not going to have to go through a really, really grueling, intense experience that you have to fight for. But there's a precedent here that you don't immediately get slammed with a custodial. You don't immediately get slammed with thousands of pounds worth of compensation, because he didn't think that was appropriate, because he understood the reasons why we did it. And that's a huge precedent. So I'm really proud of that. And proud of the people. Proud is a strange word, but I'm so grateful for all of the people that did this action alongside the 7 of us, because that is our friends and our family and the wider movement and everyone that supported it. It's like, this is a collective effort. It's not about us 7. It's about that moment in time around that action. It was a really radical group of humans that rallied around, made it happen.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing in this with us and giving life to it, and bringing some depth to it as well. I just want to see if Matthew has any closing remarks, and if you have any further remarks as well, Sophie, you're very welcome.
I feel very moved by everything I've heard, from the beginning. And particularly the way you describe that final scene with the judge, where you challenged him to step out of his role. And I think that you've touched on something so fundamental about our moment and how we're all cast into these roles. And we even think we choose them. Do we even really choose them? What chooses? What part of us chooses? And this invitation to see this moment of crisis as an opportunity to break out of these roles, to break the mold, to become something different, perhaps to become who we actually are. this is a radical proposition that I
Mm.
think lies at the very close to the core of everything in the climate crisis. And I really appreciate how you've lived that and walked that and embodied that, but also how you've articulated it today. And my whole body is like full of energy. Like I could really feel the transmission of what you were saying. And I really think this has been an important conversation that I think will touch a lot of people. So thank you for bringing your presence and trust to us. And yeah, I hope we can build on this in some other way. I'm not sure what that is, but I really hope that we can mark this as a beginning as well as a threshold. So thank you.
Well, thank you both so much. And Matthew, you've just outlined that energy. I'm feeling it too. It's like it's alive, and we're speaking through Zoom, but these mycelial networks of doing the vibey thing and feeling it and living it and remembering it. It's like that's what's so cool. And I'm really grateful for both of you for holding this space. And all I can hope with any conversation like around the trial or in general is that goes back to the suffragette thing of courage calls to courage everywhere. And this is, I'm not special. Anyone can step into their own thing and do it. Do something this in line with spirit and love, because we all have it in us, and thousands of people are doing it every day. And I think reflecting on it is helps give it extra force to support others to keep stepping in. So yeah, really grateful. And I guess I was anticipating it to be perhaps stressful and exhausting to go back into the trial, because that is certainly an energy that was present. But I'm through this conversation also remembering how strengthening and beautiful it was and is and can still be. So thank you all very much.